There is a moment in every great artist's career, a single, unrepeatable moment, where the people around them stop what they are doing, go completely silent, and think to themselves, "I have never seen anything like this before." For ParkJimin, that moment did not happen on a concert stage. It did not happen in front of millions of fans screaming his name. It happened inside a small, fluorescent-lit recording booth, somewhere in Seoul, with a Spanish producer named Pablo Diaz-Reixa, the man the world knows as El Guincho, watching through a glass panel and slowly realizing he was in the presence of something he had never encountered in his entire career. To fully understand why that moment matters, you first have to understand who El Guincho is. Because this is not a producer who gets easily impressed. Pablo Diaz-Reixa was born in Gran Canaria, raised in Barcelona, and built a reputation over 2 decades as one of the most experimental, boundary-pushing producers in the global music industry. His work doesn't fit neatly into any single category. He has produced critically acclaimed albums that blend Afrobeat, electronic music, psychedelic pop, and avant-garde composition. He has worked with artists across Europe and Latin America who operate at the absolute cutting edge of contemporary sound. He is the kind of producer who gets called when a label wants something that has never been done before. He doesn't go into a project looking to be surprised. He goes in looking to shape, to challenge, to deconstruct. And yet, when BTS came to him as part of the recording sessions for their 2026 album Erarang, something happened that he clearly wasn't prepared for. The Erarang album was an enormous undertaking from the very beginning. After years of military service, all 7 members of BTS returned to civilian life in 2025, and the pressure they placed on themselves to deliver something extraordinary was immense. This was not just a comeback, this was a statement. A declaration to the entire music world that BTS was not a moment. BTS was a movement. And to make that statement loud enough, they assembled one of the most staggering lists of collaborators in K-pop history. Ryan Tedder of One Republic, Diplo, Kevin Parker of Tame Impala, Mike Will Made It, JPG Mafia, Artemis, and El Guincho. 7 producers, 7 different creative universes, all converging on one album. What made the recording process particularly intense was the method they chose to work. Rather than the traditional approach of booking individual studio time for each member, the band operated what Jimin himself described in Rolling Stone as a factory system. 4 recording booths running simultaneously, members divided into rotating groups of 2 or 3, producers cycling through each room. It was organized chaos, a creative pressure cooker designed to generate the most music in the least amount of time while keeping every member's energy at its peak. In that kind of environment, there's almost no time for lengthy explanation. A producer sets up a sound, delivers a brief, and then the artist has to absorb it and execute. Fast. This is exactly the situation Jimin walked into during his sessions with El Guincho. According to reporting from Rolling Stone's landmark May 2026 cover story, the largest cover package the magazine had ever assembled, spanning 8 individual interviews with all 7 BTS members. What took place inside that recording session became one of the most talked about stories in the entire making of Erarang. El Guincho had laid down a track. He had a specific vision for how the vocal should sit inside it. And like any great producer working with any artist for the first time, he began explaining his vision. He talked about the emotional texture he was after, the timbre, the placement, the specific qualities he needed from whoever was stepping up to that microphone. And then Jimin did something that no one in that room expected. He sat down, and he went completely quiet for 30 minutes. Not the quiet of someone who is confused, or overwhelmed, or waiting to be told what to do. Not the silence of someone who is checked out. This was a different kind of silence. An active silence. The kind of silence that only comes from a person who is processing at a level that most people never reach. Jimin sat there, absorbing everything El Guincho had said, turning it over in his mind, mapping the emotional landscape of the track against every technical instinct he had developed over more than a decade of performing and recording at the highest level in the world. He wasn't just listening to the notes. He was listening to the intention behind the notes. He was asking himself not just what to sing, but who to be in the moment he opened his mouth. 30 minutes. In a room full of international producers with packed schedules. 30 minutes of complete, unwavering focus. And then ParkJimin stood up, walked into the recording booth, put on his headphones, and delivered a take so perfect, so precisely aligned with El Guincho's vision, so full of every nuance the producer had described, so emotionally complete that the people watching through the glass were left speechless. Not because it was technically flawless, though it was. Not because the high notes were clean, though they were. But because what came out of Jimin's voice in that moment was something that could not be taught, could not be explained, and could not be replicated. It was the sound of a human being who had spent 30 minutes becoming the song before they sang a single word of it. This is the thing about Jimin's artistry that even people who love him deeply sometimes struggle to articulate. It is not simply that he has a beautiful voice, although his voice is, by any technical standard, extraordinary. His vocal color is one of the most distinctive and immediately recognizable in all of contemporary pop music. It sits in a register that is simultaneously delicate and powerful, capable of conveying vulnerability and strength in the same breath. His transitions between chest voice and head voice are so fluid and so natural that listeners often don't notice the technical difficulty of what he is doing until they try to describe it and realize they don't have the words. And his falsetto, that particular, silvery upper register that he deploys with surgical precision, has become one of the most imitated and least duplicated sounds in K-pop history. But none of that fully explains what happened in that recording booth with El Guincho. Because what Jimin demonstrated in that session was not just vocal technique. It was something rarer and more valuable than technique. It was the ability to disappear into a piece of music completely, to shed every instinct towards self-expression, and instead become a perfect vessel for someone else's creative vision, while simultaneously bringing something to that vision that the creator hadn't even known was missing. El Guincho had described what he wanted. Jimin had listened, and then Jimin had given him not what he asked for, but something better, a version of what he asked for that was more fully realized, more emotionally resonant, more alive than anything El Guincho had imagined when he laid down the track. That is an incredibly rare skill. And it is one that speaks not just to Jimin's talent, but to his character. Because what it requires, at its core, is a kind of ego dissolution that most artists, especially artists who have achieved the level of global fame that Jimin has, simply cannot access. Most performers at that level are hardwired, consciously or not, to make the music about themselves. Jimin walked into that room and made it about the music. What makes the story even more remarkable is the context in which it happened. By the time Jimin sat down in that recording booth with El Guincho, he was already one of the most celebrated solo artists in the world. His 2023 solo debut album Face had debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200. His single Like Crazy had made him the first Korean solo artist in history to debut at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. His 2024 album Muse had delivered the global chart topper Who. He had won awards, broken records, sold out arenas, and graced the covers of the world's most prestigious magazines. He was, by every conceivable measure, a star of the absolute highest order. And yet, in that recording session, he didn't walk in as a superstar. He walked in as a student, as someone who genuinely believed that the best thing he could contribute to the moment was not his fame, not his reputation, not his instinct to showcase the voice that had made millions of people around the world fall in love with him, but his willingness to listen, to absorb, to understand before he spoke. This quality, this almost paradoxical combination of supreme confidence and profound humility, is something that Jimin himself has spoken about in multiple interviews, including his Rolling Stone cover story for the May 2026 issue. When asked about his approach to the Arirang sessions, he didn't talk about his chart success or his vocal range or his years of experience. He talked about what he had learned from his solo career, that the most important thing a musician can do is not to be afraid of asking questions. He talked about going into the studio without pretense, about trying things without the fear of failure, about approaching every session as if there was always more to learn. I wasn't afraid to ask questions, he told Rolling Stone, and I did my best to keep trying, and that, perhaps more than any single moment on the stage or in the charts, is the truest picture of who ParkJimin is as an artist. But let's go back to El Guincho for a moment, because his reaction to Jimin's recording session is not just a nice anecdote. It is a data point in a pattern that has been repeating itself throughout Jimin's career. Every time he enters a room with a musician or producer or collaborator who doesn't already know him. The pattern looks like this. skepticism or neutrality at the start, followed by quiet observation, followed by a moment of unmistakable, undeniable recognition, and then invariably the same conclusion. That Jimin is not what they expected. That Jimin is more. This pattern showed up with the producer June, who worked with BTS in their earlier years and, when asked to name the member with the best singing voice, didn't hesitate. "I'd say Jimin has the best singing voice," June said. "Their singing voice keeps me impressed to this day." Coming from someone who had been in the studio with all 7 members of one of the most talented groups in music history, that is not a casual compliment. That is a professional assessment from someone who has heard what each of those voices can do up close, at full capacity, without the polish of mixing and mastering, in the raw and revealing environment of a recording booth. The pattern also showed up in Jimin's collaborations with international artists across both his solo albums. Every collaborator who worked with him came away talking about the same quality, not just his technical ability, but his presence, his focus, the way he treats the creative process as something sacred rather than transactional, the way he shows up not to perform but to connect. And now it has shown up again, in the most significant creative project of BTS's collective career, with one of the most respected producers in the global music industry sitting behind a glass panel and watching a 29-year-old man from Busan, South Korea, spent 30 silent minutes becoming a piece of music before breathing a single note into it. There is something important to be said here about the role that Jimin's background plays in all of this. Because unlike most of the vocalists who become global pop stars, Jimin did not come to music through singing. He came through dance. His training at the Busan Arts High School was in contemporary dance. His body was his first instrument, and the kind of attention to physical and spatial precision that elite contemporary dance demands, the ability to feel a rhythm not just in your head but in your muscles, your breath, your center of gravity, is something that Jimin brought with him when he eventually turned that same precision toward his voice. He doesn't sing from a place of abstract technical awareness. He sings from a place of embodied physical intelligence. Every note he produces is connected, at a deep and primal level, to his understanding of how the body moves through space and time and emotion. That is why his voice, at its best, doesn't just sound beautiful. It feels like something. It has weight and momentum and direction. It arrives. V, his BTS bandmate, and one of the people who knows Jimin's artistry most intimately, put it as simply as it can be put in the same Rolling Stone issue. Jimin's range is vastly superior. 3 words that carry the weight of years of shared rehearsal rooms and recording sessions and stages, spoken by someone who is himself no ordinary vocalist. When V says Jimin's range is vastly superior, he is not talking about a statistical measurement of highest and lowest notes. He is talking about the full spectrum of what Jimin can do with his voice, the emotional range, the timbral range, the capacity to move from devastation to joy to hunger to tenderness without ever losing the essential quality that makes his voice his. And yet, here is what makes Jimin's story genuinely extraordinary, and what separates it from the story of almost every other artist who achieves his level of global recognition. He is not satisfied. He has never been satisfied. In his Rolling Stone interview, when asked what he wants to improve after delivering multiple #1 singles across multiple continents, his answer was immediate and unequivocal. He wants to be a better singer. He wants to learn more. He wants to practice more. He wants to grow. "I feel that I wasn't fully ready and confident when we debuted," he has said. And despite everything, despite like crazy, despite Muse, despite Who, despite Arirang, despite the sold-out stadiums and the record-breaking streams and the cover stories, some essential part of ParkJimin still believes that the best version of himself is not yet something he has achieved. It is something he is still becoming. That is the hunger that El Guincho saw in that recording booth. Not a superstar showing up to deliver a performance. Not a famous name attaching itself to a project for exposure or validation. A musician, a real musician, in the deepest sense of the word, sitting in silence for 30 minutes and asking himself how to be more, how to give more, how to reach deeper into the specific emotional truth of a piece of music and bring it back to the surface in a way that no one else could. The Arirang album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 with 641,000 copies sold in the United States in its first week. It streamed 110 million times on Spotify in a single day, the most first-day streams of any album in 2026. Its 14 tracks fill the top 14 spots on Spotify's global chart simultaneously. Critics called it BTS's most accomplished album to date. And the world tour that followed it, the Arirang World Tour, spanning 85 dates across 34 cities in 23 countries, has already generated enough economic impact in its first month alone to rank among the most significant cultural events of the decade. All of that is remarkable. All of that is worth celebrating. But somewhere inside the enormous, globe-spanning success of Arirang, there is a small and quiet story that might matter more than any of the numbers. It is the story of a man who had every reason to walk into a recording session with the confidence of someone who had already proven everything there was to prove, and instead chose to sit down, go still, and listen. Who spent 30 minutes in silence not because he didn't know what to do, but because he understood, at a level that very few artists ever reach, that the greatest gift he could bring to the music was not his star power but his attention. El Guincho came to Seoul to make a record. He came prepared with a vision, a sound, a set of creative expectations built from decades of working at the top of his field. And then a young man from Busan walked into his session, sat down without saying a word, and 30 minutes later opened his mouth and changed everything that El Guincho thought he knew about what a vocalist could be. That is the moment. That is the story. And if you want to understand why ParkJimin is not just a pop star but a genuine artist, not just a voice but a force, then that 30 minutes of silence tells you everything you need to know. Because in a world that has never been louder, ParkJimin understands something that almost no one else does. That the most powerful thing a musician can do before they make a sound is learn how to be completely, utterly, and fearlessly quiet.